Matt Olson should be a top 3 finisher for MVP this year if voters ignore the advanced analytics and do the right thing. Let's talk about it. Yes, welcome on in to Braves Today, a production of the Belief Podcast Network and presented to you by FanDuel. I'm your host, Lindsey Crosby, author of the Braves Today newsletter over at bravestoday.com. I want to look at the Minnesota Twins to close out the show, the pitching matchups for this week, some info about a surprisingly competitive team, given the fact that they traded away somewhere between 1/4 and 1/3 of the roster last deadline. I want to talk about the series over the weekend against Arizona, and how we now have 6 data points in the last couple weeks about when you face playoff caliber pitching, how this offense has struggled and what can be done to fix it. But before we do that, the reason it wasn't a sweep is because of Matt Olson. The Atlanta Braves were tied late in Sunday's game in the bottom of the 7th, and Matthew Kent Olson took care of that. Austin Riley led off with a double, and credit to Austin Riley. He's been having a very good, we've talked about this, very good post-deadline stretch. He has 3 more hard hit balls on Sunday, leads off with that double to left, and the way the way he got that double real quick was I think he took and he fouled off a pitch in the zone, but he laid off 2 of those down and away sliders. 3 months ago, that's a 3-pitch strikeout for Austin Riley. This is a 5-pitch walk where he gets a slider that misses. It's in the zone, and he crushes it, right? 110 to left. Jim Jarvis bunts Riley over to third. Jarvis had a good game. He needed a good game. He had a hit, and he also had a productive out here in a sacrifice bunt. Closer Brandon Garcia comes in, walks Drake Baldwin. Ronald Acuna Jr. strikes out, and right there I was like, don't do this. Don't do this. Don't get a runner on third with 1 out and not bring him in. Matt Olson takes 2 sweepers, takes a sinker, all balls. Brandon Garcia has to come back into the zone, and it wasn't a bad sinker, right? Like knee high. He kept it as far down as you could keep it down while still being in the zone. Matt Olson clearly expected both that pitch and that location, and he just tattoos it. 437 feet, north center to left center, right just off of the dividing line for center field. 3-run homer. Atlanta gives one of those runs back in the 9th off of Raisel Iglesias, and we'll probably talk about that in a minute too, but it's enough to win. And so when Braves Today sponsor FanDuel, when you look at the NL MVP odds, they officially have it a 2-man race. It is down to Pete Crow Armstrong or Shohei Ohtani. And that's probably the right way to do it. That's probably correct as far as who is most likely to win this. PCA's hitting 276 with a 374 on base, which is amazing. It's almost a 100-point jump from where he was last year. And a 533 slug. He's raised his walk rate. This is what gives me hope that Michael Harris can even be better than he already is PCA went from a 4.5% walk rate last year to 11.7% this year. Something clicked, and he's having a ridiculously dominant breakout year. PCA has 28 home runs. He has 30 stolen bases. He's probably not going to get 40-40 here. But he scored 87 runs. He's driven in 75. And he's played, I've said this a few times, and reminder those of you who don't know, I used to do a prospect show for Locked On MLB Prospects. #1 daily prospect podcast. Won awards for it, actually. And as part of that, I used to go around to ballpark, minor league parks in the area and watch these teams. And I watched PCA play probably 5 or 6 different games in person in Double-A. He may be the best defensive center fielder I have seen in person since Andrew Jones. I've watched a lot of baseball. He He legitimately has the potential to be generationally great in center field. So you combine the excellent offensive numbers with the amazing defensive numbers. He's at 7.7 WAR. He is 1.1 WAR above anybody else in baseball. The guy he's above is Shohei Ohtani, who is pretty much done pitching for the year, right? He's had some, I think it was like a biceps and a knee issue. And so they're not using him as a starter right now. But because it's the Dodgers, they have 37 other starters who are all, great swing and miss guys. So they're fine. So his pitching season essentially ends after 85 2/3 innings of a 1.79 ERA and an 8-2 record. But at the same time, he is still hitting every day. He's hitting .289 with a .388 on base and a .540 slug. He has 27 homers. He's only stolen 7 bags. And I don't think he's going to ramp that back up. He leads the National League in intentional walks with 16. Imagine playing the Dodgers, seeing that stacked lineup they have and saying, yeah, no, we're still going to intentionally walk Shohei Ohtani. Like, we're just going to put him on base. We'd rather face Freddie Freeman or Mookie Betts or Will Smith or whoever else, Andy Pages, whoever, rather than pitch to Shohei Ohtani. Wild, right? Those two guys probably should be 1 and 2 in the race. But third, and legitimately I think a chance, the guy who has a better case than just about anybody to finish in third place should probably be Matt Olson. And the problem with this, and I know I gave a really out of character tease up top, is the accumulation stats and the conventional statistics say Matt Olson should be there. A lot of the advanced numbers don't. And so we're rooting against the nerds here, right? Matt Olson is on the season. He is hitting .264 with a .340 on base and a .551 slug. He has 36 home runs. He has 3 stolen bases, so he's also not going to challenge for a 40-40 season this year. The slugging number leads the National League. He's outslugging Ohtani. He's outslugging PCA. He's outslugging Kyle Schwarber, all those guys. His 265 total bases lead the National League. And when you look at where he stands on the leaderboard and a lot of these other categories, he's still right up there. He's second in baseball in runs scored with 88. PCA, by the way, 87. Matt Olson has scored more runs than Pete Crow Armstrong has, despite playing less games. PCA hasn't missed a game, I don't think, so he's at 125. Olson's only at 124 because Atlanta's had more rainouts than Chicago has had. Total bases. I told you he leads the National League. He's 11 behind for Yordan Alvarez for most in baseball. He's 1 behind Alec Burleson of the Cardinals for the most doubles in all of baseball. He's tied with Alvarez and 1 behind Kyle Schwarber for the most home runs in all of baseball. He briefly was tied for the lead last week till Schwarber hit 2 in the Field of Dreams game. Olson, as far as extra base hits, he leads with 66. He has a homer every 13.4 at-bats, which is a top 5 mark in baseball. And he's all over these leaderboards as far as top 5, top 10. OPS of 891 is 9th in baseball. And I think there's technically an asterisk there because I don't think Munetaka Murakami, who's above him, has enough at-bats to qualify. But he should if he plays the rest of the season for the White Sox. Remember, he missed time with an injury. So the accumulation numbers, the conventional stats, all say Matt Olson has a good case to be considered the 3rd best player in the National League. The problem is a lot of the advanced numbers, the nerd numbers, if you will, do not. When you look at Fangraphs WAR in the National League, Matt Olson is 7th. He's behind PCA. He's behind Otto Lopez of the Marlins. He's also behind J.J. Weatherholt of the Cardinals, Bryce Terang of the Brewers, Corbin Carroll of the Diamondbacks and James Wood of the Nationals. Weatherholt, Terrain, Carroll, Wood all tied at 4.2. Olson's at 4.0. And then Otto Lopez at 4.4. PCA at 7.7. The differences here come down to two different factors. The first is that if you notice, all of these players play more premium defensive positions, right? Lopez is a shortstop. Weatherholt, Terang, their second baseman. Carroll, right field. Woods, left. James Wood, not Woods. James Wood, left field. Matt Olson, first base. They play more valuable defensive positions, so they're getting additional WAR for their contributions in the field than Matt Olson is getting for his contributions at first base, because it is considered to be the least valuable defensive position. So he's got that working against him. Thing number two is yes, he's not getting the defensive WAR that those other guys are getting, but also the offensive standard that he has to meet at first base to produce the same offensive WAR as those players is also higher. Positional adjustments are a real thing. And what these positional adjustments do is, one, in WAR, on defense, they value the defense up the middle more than defense at the corners, first base, etc. But then on offense, they set a higher standard to be considered at least average. So from an advanced statistics perspective, Matt Olson's having a very good year. The unanimous thing they all agree about is Matt Olson's having a very good year. But as far as overall value in a vacuum as compared to some of the other top performers, he doesn't quite get put in the same spot because more is expected of him as a baseline versus everybody else. And that's probably the right way to do this, right? That is how you should treat. You should not hold a first baseman to the offensive standard of a center fielder and be happy. You should expect more from your first baseman. I'm not saying it's wrong, but I'm saying that he doesn't get the respect he deserves on WAR leaderboards and things like that because of that factor. And there are some voters, and for the most part, I'm usually happy when these things happen. There are some voters who tend to look at those numbers and a player's value in the valuation systems that we've created to evaluate players across positions. Now, he absolutely has the possibility of hitting a lot of the milestone accumulation numbers that look really good. He's got 77 RBI with roughly a month and a half left in the season, a little bit less than that, right? We've played 124 games, so we've got 38 games left. Outside shot at 100 RBI, he's probably going to need more multi-run homers like he had yesterday versus a lot of the solo shots he's had. I don't want to jinx it. It feels like he's almost certainly going to get to 40 home runs for only the second time in his career. Matt Olson has stopped in the mid-30s 3 other times, and he's finished with 29 home runs 3 additional times. He seems to struggle getting over those little humps and getting to the 30, and then once he does that, getting to the 40. Good chance of doing that. He scored 88 runs. He's got a good chance of scoring 100, especially if he gets more of those home runs. So that's probably going to help. The Iron Man reputation, definitely going to help. End of the day, he probably comes in 3rd or 4th. And the 4th place finish he had in 2023 is the highest of his career. And he was always doomed for that to happen because Ronald Acuna Jr. had the year that he had, right? 41-73. And then you had both Mookie Betts and Freddie Freeman having great years for the Dodgers. So he finished 4th despite leading baseball in homers and RBI and leading the National League with a slug over 600. But he's got another chance this year simply because of the body of work being so good. Let's see if it happens. In just a minute, let's talk about the weekend series, because this is now 2 different data points we have of Atlanta facing quality postseason caliber pitching and coming up a little bit short. We'll talk about that next, right here on Braves Today. Braves lose 2 out of 3 games to the Diamondbacks over the weekend. Again, I mentioned it earlier in the last thing. They salvaged Game 3 thanks to a big Matt Olson home run late. And that's now 2 consecutive weekends in which they've struggled offensively, right? Against the Yankees, when they faced Max Fried, Garrett Cole, Cam Schlittler, which I said it then, I'll say it now. That's probably 1 through 3 right up there with the best potential postseason rotations you'll see. In that series, the Braves went 20 for 104, walked 3 times against 35 strikeouts, scored 8 runs. Of those 20 hits, 8 were extra base hits. They had 4 homers and 4 doubles. And they were outscored by 1 run on the weekend. So they hit 192 with a 215 on base and a 346 slug. Okay. This weekend, despite facing, I'm going to argue, a lower caliber of pitchers in Brandon Pfaadt, Eduardo Rodriguez, and Michael Soroka. Good pitchers. I'm not saying they're not good. I'm saying that from a pure stuff perspective, I don't think they equal the trio of Fried, Cole, and Schlittler. Atlanta hit 181, 206, 298. 17 hits in 94 at-bats. They were outscored by 7, 15 to 8. 5 of those 17 hits, 5 were doubles, 2 were homers. 3 walks to 24 strikeouts. And of those 3 walks, 1 of those was intentional, and none of them came until the very, very late in Game 3. It's the first time you really saw Atlanta draw walks on the weekend. And so now this is a second consecutive weekend where you've seen them struggle against good pitching. And I ranted about this on the postcast, I think on Saturday. I talked about this a little bit last week as well. Everybody got up in arms about the rotation and adding to the rotation at the deadline and all that good stuff. And if that's how you feel, you're fully warranted to feel that way. I'm not saying you can't feel that way. Be a fan however you want to be a fan. Just, if you're going to do it, just don't be like awful towards me because I feel differently than you. That people have been way too confident recently and just being rude in the comments and on social media, and it's just weird. Stop doing that. And I think the most frustrating part about this weekend was the pitchers weren't as good, and yet your performances were worse. And I think special mention goes to Friday night. Jake and I talked about this on the postcast. You didn't have any walks. You had 3 singles. You didn't get a runner past third. And I think you only had 4 balls even in the air. It was as close to domination as you can see outside of a no-hitter or a perfect game. Just terrible. And a lot of games 1 and 2, and game 1 you didn't have a chance to, but game 2, I felt like the Braves weren't doing enough to try and help the offense manufacture runs. And so game 3, you saw them get a little bit better about this, right? You saw them trying to do more things to force the action on Sunday. Drake Baldwin, Michael Harris, Matt Olson, Ronald Acuna, I think all stole bags off of Michael Soroka and James McCann. Some of that was Atlanta knew James McCann struggled to throw out base runners because they had him in the organization last year in AAA. But you saw them trying to force the action. You saw, I don't remember which inning it was, but Riley was on first base. I think it was either Jim Jarvis or Drake Baldwin was up. And so Riley took off and ended up running Atlanta out of a double play. He was at second base when the second baseman fielded the ball, and so they weren't able to get the double play, and they just got the out at first. You saw little things. You saw the Braves trying to push the action a little bit more, right? Jim Jarvis had the bunt. They started doing those small things that they just didn't do in the first 2 games of the series. And what I'm trying to figure out, and I'm going to assume that was deliberate and an acknowledgement by the by the coaching staff that this offense is still, in essence, powered by the home run, and this offense is still susceptible against very good pitching for power outages. And so because of that, I think that, and this is maybe an optimistic, and I'm an optimistic person, and I'll admit that I've always really treated this team optimistically because I don't want to just sit here and gloom and doom about my team. I'll talk about bad stuff when it happened, but I'm not going to assume the worst case scenario up front. Because one, that's not fun for y'all to listen to. You don't want to listen to me sit here and just rant about how the Braves are going to get eliminated and get swept out of the postseason when it hasn't happened yet. It's a possible outcome. But it's no fun to listen to somebody just rant about that for 2 months. So I'm choosing to believe that Sunday's game was a little bit of an acknowledgement by the coaching staff that, hey, we need to be more willing to do the little things to make this team, to make sure that we're putting our offense in a position to get as many runs as possible. That you saw against New York, they hit 4 home runs in the 3 games. You can get the power when everything goes right. You can still find power, and you have guys on this roster that have so much natural power and talent that it can come through even if they're not necessarily trying. But we've got to do everything possible to find offense and find ways to force the action when we're in these bad pitching matchups. So credit in game 3 where it's due. Again, 8 hits, 3 of them for extra bases. I haven't gone back to look. Part of me thinks 4 stolen bases in one game might be the single season high for the Braves. I just can't think of very many other games where they've stolen that many bags. Checking real quick, there was one other game Atlanta did that. June 6th against Pittsburgh and starter Braxton Ashcraft. Atlanta stole 4 bags. And that was, and it looks like that time, just like this time, one of those was a double steal by Ronald Acuna Jr. and Matt Olson. Because we got that in this game. And it looked like Ronald decided to steal third, and Olson took the jump and went to second at the same time. I don't think they called a double steal there. This is all speculation. I don't think they called a double steal. And in that Pirates game, same thing. Ronald stole, Matt Olson stole behind him, and double steal accounted for 2 of the 4, and then Ozzie had 1. And Mauricio Dubon's listed as stealing home. I'm trying to remember that specific play because I don't remember a straight steal of home this year. I want to say that was one of those first and third scenarios. I'm willing to bet you that was something where, I'm actually willing to bet you the Ozzie steal was connected. Just off the dome. I'm willing to bet you what happened was Ozzie was on first and Ozzie stole second. And when they threw down to second, maybe the throw was bobbled, maybe it was off the glove or something, and Dubon took off and stole home. Because Atlanta likes to try that first and third thing. They haven't actually, the league's gotten pretty decent. Nobody really knows the best way to defend it, but the league's gotten pretty decent at not letting the guy from third score. However they do it. There's a lot of different ways you can defend it, right? I've seen the catcher just fake the throw to second and try to backpick the guy at third. I've seen maybe the shortstop's covering second and the second baseman comes in front of the bag to cut the throw off and go back home with it. A lot of different ways to defend it. I'm willing to bet you that's what the steal of home was. But anyway, second game this year where Atlanta's stolen 4 bags. And doing all of those little things is going to be really important. And the tough part about this isn't even the postseason lineup. I think the lineup that you've seen with Mauricio Dubon at shortstop and Ronald and right, Drake Baldwin at DH, and Murphy behind the plate, and some combination of Yastrzemski or Thomas in left, depending on the handedness of the pitcher, I feel like that is the postseason lineup. So, yes, the offense wasn't good enough. But also, how much can we take from that when they weren't running the lineup we're going to see them run in the postseason? Starting to wonder, it's like, at what point do you start transitioning to running that lineup more often? Is it something where you need to be rolling out that lineup 4 or 5 times a week? You DH Ronald twice. Those are Sean Murphy's off days and Drake Baldwin's behind the plate. And then 4 days a week, you run the lineup with Murphy behind the plate and Dubon at short. I'm trying to figure out how that's going to work. What point do you do that? Before we go to break, let's talk about Raisel Iglesias. He gets the 9th inning in a 3-run game. And it doesn't go that great. Middle of the order, right? So Ketel Marte, who I think was batting cleanup, is the leadoff hitter. Walks him on 6 pitches. Max Kepler, 105-mile-an-hour single. And then things got weird. Tim Tawa flies out for the second out of the inning. But after the catch is made, the third base umpire waves off the play and calls Iglesias for a balk. It's the second straight weekend where you have some sort of dumb balk call that goes against the Braves. And it's the third time in a week and change that you've got to go run and chase down a crew chief to ask about why this weird play, this weird umpire ruling went against the Braves. Kind of getting tired of that. I talked to somebody on the Arizona beat, trying to figure out what happened, because the MLB research tool, which is what I use, it's like a not paywalled, but it's a login protected data source from MLB that has clips of every play and all of whenever I'm tweeting out the strength of the arm of the throw from right field by Ronald or the sprint speed of a player, it's all coming from the research tool. Live after every play, it's dumping clips and alternate video angles, and it's dumping all of the stats that they collect. Most of them. We're not getting base runner sprint speed this year for some reason. But it's dumping all those stats, and I can go in and pull clips and pull information and everything. The research tool doesn't capture clips of non-plays. So I couldn't go back and watch this. And at least when I wrote this game story last night, the Today's 3 Things game story at bravestoday.com, there was no clips floating around of the Iglesias balk. I talked to somebody on the Arizona beat, and he said his understanding of it was the dugout saw something about about Iglesias separating his hands a little bit after he came set. And so they started yelling during the play. So I do want to be clear, the dugout thinks they saw, and I'm willing to bet this is something they had seen on video. And so they were watching for it. They saw it ahead of time on video, and they were watching for it in his outing. They started yelling during the play, and when the play was over, the third base umpire blew the play dead to call the balk. That ends up moving runners to second and third. So Tim Tawa gets another chance because that flyout never happened. He grounds out. Marte scores from third. Iggy was very clearly he was shook a little bit by the whole thing. He was not composed like he usually should be. He gets the flyout of James McCann. He preserves the save. We get the win. He's now allowed 6 runs on 9 hits and 5 walks in 6 2/3 innings. And Iggy's good every year for 2 weeks where he's just a little bit shaky and then he figures it out. Last year was like a month. Everything went wrong for Atlanta last year. Whatever. It was like a month last year. But what I'm trying to figure out is if this stretch is just that or if it's something more. He usually walks 2 batters a month, right? Sometimes less, sometimes more. April, he only pitched through April 19th where he went on the IL, but he walked 1 guy. May, he walked 2. June, he walked 3. July, he walked 3. August, he's already walked 5. And obviously the hits are a thing as well. The hits are coming along with this and everything. I feel like his locations are a little off right now, right? He's just not necessarily hitting the spots that he likes to hit. And I don't think I am panicking about anything. I don't think you need to make a change at closer. I'm concerned. It pretty much needs to stop now. It's pretty much been 2 weeks, right? It was His first rough outing of the month was August 4th. Yesterday was August 16th. Literally, it's been like 2 weeks. It's only been like 2 weeks. If you had Robert Suarez around, it would be really easy to just be like, hey, we're going to give Iggy the 8th and Suarez the 9th. And you could even launder that for a little while by saying, oh, there was matchups. We like the matchups in the 9th with Suarez better, so we put Iggy in the 8th. You could launder that if you wanted to. Nobody would believe it, but you could say it, right? But with Suarez out, you got to figure this out. And that's, to me, one of the bigger things I'm going to be watching for when it comes to the bullpen is Raisel Iglesias and what he looks like. Because part of the whole 27-ounce plan depends on the bullpen guys being ace, just being locked down. Your Dylan Lee, Suarez being back, Iglesias, Dylan Dodd, who we did a show. If you missed it, we did a bonus show on Saturday where I went through the story that I wrote recently about him. It's a new little format I'm trying where it's just 15 minutes, one short ad break in the middle, about a single topic that came from the newsletter. It's like the best of the Braves Today newsletter. Think of it that way. So if you liked that article, you want to hear the written version, or you just aren't subscribed to the newsletter and you sometimes don't see the things that we're doing over there, that's a great example of the types of things that we are doing. So go check that out. But I want this to get fixed, clearly. I want Atlanta to figure out what's going on here and to take care of this. And if they can't, the good news is you are supposed to have Robert Suarez back for October. He increased the distance in his throwing program on Friday. Didn't report any pain or anything afterwards from what we got from the Braves beat. So you should be good here, but you never know until you actually do it, right? In just a minute, let's talk about the Twins. Having a really weird year, especially after selling last year, and then this year being right there in the wild card race. We'll break that down next, right here on Braves Today. Atlanta flew to Minnesota last night for a 3-game series in Target Field versus the Twins that starts today. And this is a really weird 3-team, 4-city road trip. Okay. So you've got Monday, Tuesday, night games, 7:40 Eastern, a little bit later than usual, versus the Twins. Getaway day, Wednesday game at 1:40. And then you fly to Chicago to make up a rained out game from June against the White Sox. That's a 2:10 start. That's the game, by the way, where I'm expecting AJ Smith-Shawver to come back up and start. I know Walt Weiss said over the weekend that their plan was for Holmes to make his next start as scheduled. I really think they're going to end up changing. After sleeping on it for 2 days, I really just think that was Walt Weiss protecting this guy. I think that was Walt Weiss doing the thing that he needed to do as a good manager and protecting his guy, and then they can just come out there later and they can, before they announce the rotation for the upcoming series, they can say, hey, AJ's going to be the guy on Thursday, and then either they'll start Holmes on Friday or they'll just put him in the pen from there. Who knows? Anyway. But yeah, you play White Sox on Thursday. Then you go to Milwaukee. You play 4:10 on Friday, weird time. 2:10 on Saturday, weirder time. And then Sunday morning, the Braves are getting up, from what I understand. They're not going to leave until Sunday. And they're going from Milwaukee to Williamsport, Pennsylvania for the Little League Classic. So they're going to play the game against the Brewers on ESPN Sunday Night Baseball in the Little League ballpark on Sunday. And then after the game is over, they're then going to fly home. They have an off day on Monday, and then they'll face the Dodgers for 3 on Tuesday. So weird kind of odd schedule coming up. Big road trip here. But it starts with the Twins. And when you look at what the Twins are doing this year, they sold a ton of guys last year, and then they've rebounded. The bullpen's not good because they traded all the bullpen away. They had to add to the deadline. They are a game and a half out of a playoff spot in the American League. The final wildcard spot has 7 teams battling for one spot. At this point, barring some sort of collapse, the top 5 in the American League is all set. Rays have the best record. They're winning the East. Chicago White Sox are winning the Central, and it's not particularly that close. They're winning the Central pretty handily. They have a 5.5 game lead on Detroit. It's not that close. The Astros are leading the West, and that's a smaller lead, but only because the division's been bad in general. Everybody else is below 500. And then the Yankees and Red Sox are 8 and 5 games up, respectively, on the final wildcard spots. So they have wildcard spots here. The Orioles currently hold the final wildcard spot by half a game over the Rangers, by 1 game over Toronto and Detroit, by 1.5 games over Minnesota and Cleveland, and 2.5 over Seattle. And almost nobody in that group is playing like they want the playoff spot. Toronto's 7-3 in their last 10 games. The whole reason they're back in this. Literally one good week, and they're back in the playoff race because the American League's so bad. Everybody else has been 5-5, 4-6, 3-7 in the last 10 games. Nobody wants the final playoff spot in the American League. The Twins have a shot at it, though. Playoff odds come out to something like 8 or 9%, according to Baseball Reference. And when you look at FanGraphs, they have them as like a 20% chance of making the postseason. But the pitching matchups, Atlanta gets good news of getting the best guys. It's Martin Perez on Monday versus Bailey Ober. Tyler Mahle goes on Tuesday versus Zebby Matthews. Neither one of those guys have been that good this year. Chris Sale goes on Wednesday against Taj Bradley, who's been one of the better starters, not named Joe Ryan, who, by the way, is out with injury. Has good stuff, still struggles to put it together at times. So Atlanta has the pitching advantage in all 3 games. When you look at this actual Twins team and what they do, though, you can see how this is still a dangerous Twins team. Top prospect Kalen Culpepper was called up for shortstop. He's been up, I think, a week or so, maybe 10 days. So not entirely translating yet, but the potential's there. Byron Buxton just came off the IL for the weekend series. So he's back. He's playing well. Ryan Jeffers was not traded at the deadline. He's probably going to start 2 of the 3 games. He got Sunday off. He'll probably start Monday and Tuesday and get the finale off. That's how they like to use him for the most part. It's 2 games on, 1 game off. Moving to first base by Royce Lewis has enabled him to stay healthy. And so he's playing pretty well right now for them. Josh Bell has been the DH. They moved him from first base to DH. When Lewis came back, he's playing pretty well right now. Brooks Lee is now at third, and he's actually been pretty decent in the last week or week and a half or so. This team is legitimately playing like they could make the playoffs. They are top 10 in runs scored. They're 9th best at scoring runs. They're not allowing a ton of runs from their bullpen. Their offense, their rotation is. But this is solidly a above average offense in just about every regard. Average on base, OPS. They're 12th, 11th. Again, 9th in runs. They're floating around that 9 to 12 range in a lot of these different numbers, except for stolen bases. They're not great at stolen bases. Some of that was Buxton being out. But the offense is potentially dangerous. The pitching staff, they added A.J. Minter. They added Jeff Hoffman at the deadline. So Minter's a rental. I think Hoffman still has a little more team control. And they're getting Yoendris Gomez has stepped up a little bit as their closer. They've got the bullpen has pieces. And I'm gonna reference the bullpen the same way that I always talk about, when you played the Padres and when you played the Giants. On the whole, the bullpen is not necessarily playing incredibly well, right? Andrew Morris blew a save on Sunday, for instance. But they've got talented players. And those guys can still step up and perform when you need them to stumble so you can take a lead. Leadoff man Trevor Larnach's having a great year, right? Josh Bell hasn't been, but he's good right now, and he has the talent. Royce Lewis has been hurt a lot, but he has the talent to take you deep whenever he has a chance, right? AJ Minter, Jeff Hoffman, individually a little bit of underwhelming seasons. Minter still has a pretty decent ERA, but they have the ability to come out there and just shove and shut you down in an inning if they're in a groove. So it's a dangerous matchup, and you should be favored in all three. And I talked about this last week. You should be favored in most series that you play. And I'm sure when I do the scouting report this afternoon, Brave State sponsor FanDuel is going to say that Atlanta's a favorite on the money line despite being on the road. But you can lose some of these games, right? You can get got by this team because the players may be talented. The bullpen as a whole hasn't been great, but there's talented players back there. And that's kind of the problem with this. So do not look past the Minnesota Twins this week. Do not think about, hey, we should consider bumping Sale or whatever to try to have him against Milwaukee. You probably need him for Minnesota. Those games matter too. Does it suck to not have Chris Sale when you face the Brewers this upcoming weekend? It'd be nice. Right now, the way things line up, assuming that AJ Smith-Shawver starts on Thursday, things line up to have Elder, Perez, and Malley against the Brewers on Friday, Saturday, Sunday. But you're at the point where if you want to get the bye, you just have to treat every series as, hey, we have to win this. And shout out to subscriber Valerie. You asked a question the other day about, is it more important to get the bye or just not worry about it and play the wild card? Who cares? And I'm going to talk about it, probably give it a whole segment on tomorrow's show. But my initial reaction is I think you want to make sure that you get the bye. We'll talk about it on tomorrow's show. I'm going to give it a whole segment for you there. But I'm pretty sure, and we'll talk out both scenarios. But my initial thoughts are you probably want to make sure you get the bye. So again, if you want more on this series, on this matchup, the scouting report will be this afternoon. Once lineups are announced, we will talk about the lineups, the pitching matchups, the bullpen status, what you need to know, the path to victory for both teams, all that good stuff. It'll be in your Braves Today podcast feed and live on YouTube. Afternoon usually comes out around 4 o'clock or so, depending on when the lineups go up. And then we'll break down each game, both in podcast form on the Locked On Podcast Network, on Locked On Braves and Locked On Sports Atlanta with a postcast, and in written form at bravestoday.com with our patented game recap article called Today's Three Things, where we break down the turning point of the game, the player of the game, and what you're going to be talking about afterwards. In the meantime, thanks for being here. Thanks for subscribing to Braves Today. Really do appreciate it. I haven't said that recently. Really do appreciate the positive comments and the excitement and the questions and the support. It means a ton. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you next time on Braves Today.